She is nameless yet memorable, and she shows up in the book of Luke for a brief moment. Now, we can imagine where her story takes place. A crowded temple corridor, sun streaming in through the stones, the world busily and importantly dropping coins one by one. Some bringing large gifts, others bringing moderate ones, but each one giving out of their excess, except for her. As she approaches to drop in her offering, she gives everything that she has. She gives out of her poverty, out of her lack, and Jesus takes notice. Her steps forward into the week, into the month, into the year, all of them are unpredictable. She doesn't have a lot of alternative spaces to anchor herself, to find security or a foundation to build on. She has come to the temple and she willingly gives all because somehow the God she worships is all that she requires. And there is something about this kind of devotion, about her willingness to be generous, about her simple act of throwing in 2 copper coins, her signaling that when everything else is uncertain, she knows that in the meantime, she has but one foundation that is worthy of Jesus' attention. There's something there that he wants his disciples to take note of. There's something there that he wants his followers to understand. But the disciples, as they have been known to do, barely take notice. They are too busy admiring the splendor that surrounds them. They're too busy admiring the opulence, the gold and the silver, the fabrics and the etchings, the stonework and the millwork that makes up the temple, that makes up the space that they have turned their faces to and their prayers towards for all of their life. And I wonder if Jesus is perplexed. If he is perplexed by their narrow vision, by their lack of interest in the woman who gave everything, in the kingdom secrets that might be hidden within her actions and hidden within his observation. The kingdom of God is at hand. That has been his mantra with the stories and declarations and miracles, teachings and defiance all the way along. Defiant as he says, you have heard it said, but now I say to you. Defiant as he proclaims the Sabbath was made for man, man was not made for the Sabbath. Defiant as the lost and the least and the most unlikely are welcome to dine with him, to follow him, and to even wash his feet with their tears and their perfume. Despite his constant proclamations, the message of the kingdom seems to be garbled and intertwined with the message of the temple, the message of religion, the message of tradition, the message of the institution. The message that announces the breadth and depth of God is found only within these walls and within these structures, within the religion and the rules of it all. And while it may sound like the very thing we want to announce, that we should announce, that we want to lean into as a church or as Christ followers, there is the message of the kingdom seems to invite us to more than religion, more than rules, more than actions. But rather, it seems the kingdom is bent not on pointing us towards the structure, but rather on pointing us in the direction of God himself. Now, as a Wesleyan, I have this deep belief, and I just discovered, because Rick told me that when you say Wesley, you smile. So that's his grandson's name. I thought it was because of John Wesley, but that's just because I grew up in Methodism. But as a Wesleyan, I have this deep belief that God is present regardless of our acknowledgement. We do not make God active. We do not make God compassionate. We do not make God gracious or loving. But we also recognize that there is something unique and something mysterious and perhaps even something powerful that happens when we acknowledge God at work in and around us, and then intentionally participate with God. It's here that we are opened up to the Holy Spirit's leading and guidance. It's here that we have the opportunity to live as ones who are transformed and being transformed. It's here that we have the opportunity to live not with reliance or hope or faith in our spiritual disciplines, traditions, and institutions or actions. Instead, we come recognizing our poverty and our own inability. But we also come with this deep gratitude that this God who knows us, this God who wants to be known, that they hold us and sustain us, that they carry us and they form us. And so when everything is shaking, when we ourselves have lost our balance or lost our way, there is but one thing that remains true. There is one thing that remains foundational. And so as the disciples are admiring the temple, and Jesus is admiring this woman's devotions, her eyes set in the direction of God, her actions pointing towards a realization of a God present in the midst of all that is unstable, he announces that what the disciples are busy admiring is the very thing that will not stand. And Jesus goes further and he announces woefully that the very things that his followers have relied on, the constants, the certainties of life, the people they imagined would hold on to them, that not even those are guaranteed to stand firm. And I guarantee that in every generation and in every culture and context, that when people have come to Luke chapter 21, that they have heard or read these words, and I bet you that they have all wondered if it were not addressing them and their situation, if it was not addressing where they were personally or collectively. Because over and over and over again, we are reminded, whether it be through war or genocide, colonization or personal crisis, climate change or sickness, economic uncertainties, broken relationships, unreliable unions, or spiritual upheaval. Over and over again, we are reminded that nothing is as certain as the acknowledgement that everything is uncertain. And Jesus in this passage seems to ask the question, when it all falls apart and it all falls away, when the towers you built and the institutions you carved and the systems you created and the ways you formed can no longer hold you and can no longer sustain you, what will sustain you and what will hold you? Will it be economics, our deep reliance on those systems of markets that rise and fall? Will it be politics and politicians? Will it be the way that we are governed? Will it be our families? Will it be religion, ideas, and ideologies? Will it be our capacity to know more and to become more knowledgeable? And Jesus seems to suggest in his long list of calamities that are to come, calamities that each generation faced and has faced, and that which he predicts may very well come in the lifetime of his hearers: the crumbling of the temple, the warring of an empire, the rising fear elicited towards those who choose to uphold and live into the message of the kingdom more so than the message of the empire. That nothing they or we imagined could hold us, sustain us, or keep us is actually equipped or sufficient to carry us when everything is shaking. And I hear this echoed in the passage, this picture of what it looks like to find ourselves flailing and shaken, only to discover that it's not the tower and it's not the institution and it's not the religion or the systems that are the needed constant. Instead, there in the midst of what feels like losing it all is the faithful, steadying, consistent, empathetic, and loving presence of the God who has always known us, the God we were created to know. There is nothing that seems to be more true in this moment than what we once thought was a society that could not be moved is shifting and changing. And sometimes it feels like the very ground beneath us is losing its hold. And that sentiment is held from those who deeply believe in God and are dedicated to the church, to those who love God and are weary of the church, to those who are uncertain, and to those who insist there's nothing more than what can be seen. But what unites these minds is this reality that nothing is certain, and if we listen too long, or if we dive in too deep, we find that chaos is somehow in the reach of us all. But regardless of us, there is something that rings more and more true to me the longer I live and the more that I know Jesus, and it is this, that God is love. And so when everything is shaking, there is this one true thing, the only thing left. Because my hope in stuff can't keep me afloat. My trust in leaders hasn't stopped the ground from shaking. My commitment to various institutions has not eased the unease. And everything I can grab a hold of seems to also want to grab a hold of me. Yet it is that one thing that remains constant, despite everything that shifts and changes. Gilbert Ruiz speaks about the passage this way. He says, despite its language and imagery of destruction, Luke 21, 5-19 is ultimately a passage that's grounded in hope. In the hope that God remains present in the world and in one's life, even when things have gotten so bad it feels like the world is closing in on us. There's a word that we don't often use. It's a word that kind of has an old-timey ring to it, and it's the word faithful. It's a word that conjures that image of loyalty and consistency and endurance and permanence. It's a word that makes me think about God. And while the image of us leaning towards God and learning to trust God is not something that I think we should dismiss, I think we would be faulted if we were to neglect the nature and the character of God that this passage portrays. And the character trait that stands out is faithfulness, a God who is faithful. But the word faithful isn't enough to me unless it is united with love. And there's this Hebrew word that frequents the Old Testament, and it's called hesed. It's a word that can be difficult to define, but could be summed up like this: love that looks like faithfulness. And so as the markets shift, and rumors of recessions loom, and as relationships strain and struggle, as war abounds, as politics remain political, as ideologies and conspiracies continue to prove that they save no one, and as the planet gets hotter and as glaciers melt, as power remains in the hands of a few, and as there never seems to be enough, there is God who does not just offer us love, but who is love. Love that looks like faithfulness when everything is shaking, when we're in desperate need of a foundation, when we long and cry out for peace. There, in the midst of it all, is hesed, love that looks like faithfulness. Rachel Held Evans says this. She says, the truth is you can't earn God's love because you already have it. You can't be any more loved than you are because God's love has already been freely and abundantly given. You can't do anything to achieve a greater portion of God's love because God's love for you is already unconditional and it is already infinite. I hope you will know this to be true. I hope you'll feel deep within your heart and with every cell of your being that you are held and embraced by the God who made you, the God who redeemed you, and the God who accompanies you through every end and onward to every beginning. So I'm going to invite you just to extend your hands to receive this blessing this morning. I know, it's okay. It's okay to do awkward things in church. It's okay. No one, I'm not taking a picture of you. Don't worry. May you notice where God is filling, empowering, inspiring, and inviting. And not just where the world is stealing, throbbing, taunting, and destroying. That each new day would bring with it new hope, like God's graces in the morning, towing you in to the waters of new life. May that blessing go with you as you go into your week. Have a blessed week.